Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. Today's conversation is one I truly believe you should listen to the end, because you learn a lot too about how to find your own light. My guest just did that. Tonier Cain is a trauma survivor and an advocate, educator, and a speaker. And she shares her insight around the world on trauma, addiction, incarceration, homelessness, substance abuse, mental health pain, abuse pain from your relationship with your husband, taking your kids away, so much. But she also shares a critical message, how she's found her joy. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Tonya. So Tonya works tirelessly to raise awareness about trauma. She works with the world to inform people about the difficult and challenges she's had and why this is so important to understand what is going on and what the trauma person experiences. She's trained providers in all 50 states of the United States. Tonya is an advocate and educator speaking all over the world on trauma and various issues. Her work has been used as a model in other countries for the establishment of their trauma-informed care protocol. She hosts an annual national conference to update and enlighten providers on current best practices. Tonya's method has proven to be effective, resulting in numerous awards for her book. She's been honored by 2 governors, a mayor, and a state attorney. She's an author, and she's also the founder and CEO of the Tonier Cain International. She's an award-winning film producer and is the creator and producer of the upcoming TV Restoration. She's also an executive producer of the film Walking Through Bullets. I'm super delighted to share this conversation with her, her journey, and most importantly, how she's managed to overcome her pain to find her job. Meet my amazing guest, Tonier Cain, as she shares her story. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. If you've been following this conversation in any way, if you follow the Painless Universal Conversation, you will understand that our conversation focuses on living with pain, whatever circumstances it might be, but finding your joy. Today's conversation, I said in the introduction, will really blow your mind away. Imagine this: trauma survivor, advocate, educator, speaker, trauma addiction, homelessness, substance abuse, mental health struggles. I'm just naming them randomly, guys, but there's so much more to their story. She's been through it all, but what we're going to understand from all this pain, how our guest, wonderful lady, Tonier Cain, found her joy. How are you today?
I am good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, anyone who wouldn't have you on their show, I think, was just gone mad, because they were missing out on a vital thing which society needs today. Yeah. Your story inspired me because obviously I've been through my own pain and I've always struggled to find my joy, but I did. And I'm always happy when I meet others who's gone through whatever trauma they've been through in life, managed to work themselves out of it and still find their joy in one way or the other. Before we get started, who are you?
Well, I'm Tonier Cain. I live outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States.
Oh, wow. That's lovely. I'm sure you probably know all of this. I love Washington, D.C., so I'm always excited to be back in the United States. I haven't been for such a long time due to pandemic. When you look at your life, right? When you look at Tonier Cain life, let's go to the very beginning.
Okay.
What's your life like as a child?
Well, unfortunately, my life it's almost common now, because we hear so many children that has been through neglect, abandonment and neglect. And so in the United States, this month is actually celebrated as the National Child Abuse and Neglect Awareness Month. So I'm always very busy in April, because we're always trying to continue to bring the awareness around that. But because it's more common than not now. And so I grew up in a household with a single mother. I'm the oldest of 10.
Oh, wow.
I'm the oldest of 10. My mother's an alcoholic. She's always has been an alcoholic. She's a drug addict now. And so she would leave us sometimes in the household 2 and 3 days at a time without come on checking on us, just going out and partying. And I thought that I had to be the one that take care of my sister and brothers because I was the oldest. And at age 9, I had 7 brothers and sisters, and so and then ended up being 10 of us. But molestation started very early on for me, around age 9. My first sexual abuse, and that continued through life. And when you're a child and these things happening to you, because I was already being neglected and physically abused by my mother, I thought when the sexual abuse started to happen, it was one more bad thing to happen to a bad person, because I really believed that bad things only happen to bad people.
Yes.
When I was a child. So if this very, very bad thing is happening to me, that must mean I'm a very, very bad child. So I tucked it inside of me and I didn't tell anybody about it. So I lived with it. When the sexual abuse started, there was a lot of things going on. I was unable to go to school a lot because I had to stay home and take care of my sister and brothers a lot. But also, my mother will have these parties, and a lot of community men, Black community people come throughout the apartment. And the next day I would find these half-filled cups of alcohol. And even at age 9, I learned how to cope with alcohol. And I started to drink at age 9 to help me to cope. Because, when you have a parent that's an alcoholic, there's always alcohol, right?
Yes.
And so that went from being a sexual abuse. And interesting enough, I think about how children, we're so resourceful when we're dealing with a lot of pain. And we really are. It's incredible, because back then I used to brush my teeth a lot. Not because my mother said brush in the morning after every meal at night. She's never told me that. She's never even taken us to the dentist as children. Never had we ever been to the dentist as children. But I brushed my teeth a lot because we had this old beat up toothbrush and a box of baking soda. And what I thought was, if only I brush my teeth and wash my face till it's almost raw, because no matter what I did, the smell of the men when they forced themselves around my face and my mouth, and the smell never seemed to go away, even when it wasn't happening. So very early on, the psychological part of it stayed there. And so I would always brush. I always smelled bad. I was teased for smelling bad. I was a bedwetter, mostly because I was too afraid to go in the hallway sometimes, because I thought if I went in the hallway to go to the bathroom, one of the men would push me up in the corner. Yeah. So I peed myself, and I never knew how to take care of myself. So my nickname in elementary school was Pissy Mean, because I always smelled like urine. I would get to school and the kids would circle me and call me these names. I would break through the circle, run into the school, in the bathroom, huddle down and cry. But nobody will ever ask,
what's wrong?
What's happening? Right.
But, looking saying this, you were the oldest of 9 siblings. What was happening to the others? Why this whole thing was happening to you?
Well, a lot of it, I took the blunt for a lot of it, even though they had their own trauma, the neglect, the abandonment, some physical abuse and things like that. I only had one sister that actually told me that she had been abused sexually. I've never seen any of them, being abused sexually.
Okay. So you were the one who actually took the whole pain, because you're the older one and the easiest target, because people felt that no point doing it to the younger, already a little bit too young. Let's focus on you. When you look at that tender age of that being just 9, because 9 is such a tender age, and I struggle to imagine what I was doing when I was 9, because the memories are so vivid. But you went through all this pain. How did it go on to your teenage years? How did your teenage years continue with all this pain? Because your life didn't get better from what you were going through. The school didn't recognize what your pain you were going through. So how did this pain continue through your teenage years?
Well, it's continued. So eventually, the Department of Social Services stepped in, removed us from my mother, and was put into foster care homes, which is another layer of trauma, because you're separated from the only people you know and given to strangers. And from there, I went to live with my cousin. But at age 14, at my cousin's house, I felt like for the first time in my life, I felt a little safe because nobody was touching me and nobody was teasing me. But as children want to do, they want to be connected to the people they're supposed to be connected to, right? So I always wanted to be with my mother. I love my mother. So when she came back around age 14 and said she wanted me to come back and live with her, well, I didn't hesitate. My mother said she wanted me. I ran upstairs, I packed my things, and off into the sunset, I went with my mother. Well, by then she had 3 more kids. And I realized very early on, she didn't want me back because she loved me. She needed a babysitter. Wow. And she beat me in front of the whole community. I mean, brutally beat me in front of the community. I ran away and I ran to a cousin's house. And because I thought at age 14, my only escape was suicide. I did.
Now, where did that thoughts of suicide, how did you know what suicide was at that
Because
age?
I heard someone say, if you take, and I don't remember who or when, but I remember hearing somebody say that if you take a bottle of pills, you die.
Yes.
I didn't know any other way to attempt suicide, but I did hear somebody say, you take a whole bottle of pills, you'll die. Mm. And I ran into my cousin's house in her bathroom. I took the biggest bottle of anything I could find. And when I woke up in the emergency room, they brought me to, and they were trying to get the tube down my throat to get the charcoal in my stomach. I could see them talking to my mother off to the side. And she convinced them that this was an accidental overdose. It was my own medication and it was accidental. And they believed her and they released me back into her care 2 days later. So she didn't know what to do with me. She sent me to live with my aunt. Now, by now, at age 15, I'm an alcoholic because I never stopped drinking. When I went to foster care, I stole their drinks. When I went to my cousin's house, I stole their drink. And when my mother sent me to my aunt's house, I stole their drinks. In order for me to go to high school, to stay in school, I had to sip on gin and juice all day long. And my aunt really didn't know what to do with me. So she allowed me to get this part-time job. So when this guy thought I was cute, and he was 8 years older than me, way into his 20s, he befriended my mother by giving her all the alcohol she could possibly drink. So when it came time for her to sign the marriage license on my behalf, she signed it. I married him, and he became my worst predator. He would stomp me and beat me until he seen blood all day long.
How old were you when you and your mother?
When I first 16.
And can you remember how old this guy was?
He was 24.
And you got married to him because he would obviously go to your mom and gave her some bunch of alcohol, which is something she desperately
needed. They became drinking friends. Became drinking friends.
Yeah.
And she signed the marriage license. I didn't even have to go.
Later, so my thought here is that when you married him, you married this man that was beating you, an older guy, because you were just 16. And you had your firstborn child taken away.
Yes.
Become hooked on drug and was sexually abused in incarnation. Let's go to this story because I think the reason I'm trying to understand the story very deeply before we get into the next level of your story is because when people don't understand what you've been through, they just automatically say that I look at you, I look at a beautiful lady, someone who speaks very eloquently, who understands what she's, understands the environment. But no one understands the pain you've been through to be where you are today. When you got married, what led him on that path to start hitting you? What was his goal?
Well, it always was when he drank. When he drank alcohol, he became a totally different person. The first time he beat me was when I was pregnant with our son. We weren't even married yet, but we was living together. Mm-hmm. And he was on the phone talking to another woman. And I said, why are you talking to another woman? And he got angry because he was sitting here drinking. He started punching me in my side when I was pregnant. Now understand this. His abuse at that time, I did not see it truly as abuse. Because I grew up seeing men beat my mother and her ending up in bed with them later on. So I thought that was the whole process of a relationship. Oh, because she would say, he just loved me so much. That's why he get jealous. He loved me so much. And that was my mindset because I would never have left my husband. He left me because I thought that was how it was supposed to be. Now remember, I had my mindset that I am nothing, I never amount to anything, because that was my belief system that I created because of the things that was happening to me. So when my husband, who I thought would protect me from all the other bad men of the world, he was the worst. He started to beat me. I thought I dealt with it. I dealt with it because it certainly at that point wasn't the worst thing that I experienced, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And when you think about the beaten, what would he physically do to you?
Oh my goodness. So he is 6'2". I'm 5'3.5". I'm very little. I'm 5'3.5". 120 is my max weight probably. He's a very tall, big guy, and I'm talking stomp and kicking me in my stomach. I mean, beating like he was fighting another man in the street or something.
And when your son was born, how did this lead that your son was now taken away from you, and how did he end up leaving that marriage?
So at the end, during my marriage, the alcohol wasn't working anymore. So I had a neighbor that introduced me to cocaine. So I started to do the cocaine to help me to numb myself even more. So eventually, my husband, he didn't pay the bills, and so we ended up getting evicted from our home, and he went to live on his father's property and left me homeless. So I went to move back, guess where? To my mother, with my mother, who was still the same person. And so on the weekends, I would just go and party because, again, I'm trying to cope. So he came to pick up my son for the weekend one weekend, and he just never brought him back. And when I went to him and his girlfriend's place, screaming, crying, give me my son, they pushed me down in the street. And I was treated like that. And he took my son. And when you have somebody that is, again, my belief system, I am nothing. How do I fight a man whose father got money, his father got this, they can, and I really didn't have any place for my son to live. One thing I did know was that he loved his son.
Yeah. And when someone listens to your story, one of the things, even when you watch your other videos, one of the things you talk about is not just the pain of your own internal household, from your husband, from your mother. You also arrested numerous times. You went to numerous foster care. Can you tell us about those journey? Because there's a big mugshot of you that goes around, and what led on that path of you getting arrested and all that?
So when my husband left, remember, I'm young. I had no job experience. I had left high school to be with him. I had no job experience, no education, and I had no money. And then I had a new habit, cocaine habit. And so I would do things to support my drug addiction, and to get things for my mother. So my first charge was I just wrote a bunch of bad checks, and that led to 83 arrests and 66 convictions. Yeah, 83. I've been arrested 83 times with 66 convictions for the 20 years that I lived homeless on the streets.
Because you were doing what felony were you committing? What did you do?
And things that goes along with drug addiction, prostitution, theft, possession.
Anything to survive.
Anything to survive, and then being caught with the drugs and trespassing, being on the streets, just trying to make it. All those charges were from the drug addiction and being homeless on the streets. And they would incarcerate me, and then they would tell me that they would ask me questions. It's funny because they were asked us questions, and I would answer the questions according to my trauma, my pain that I suffered. And they would diagnose me mentally ill because of it. Not because I really had a mental illness, but because they didn't understand the symptoms of trauma. And so they would put me on all this medication where sometimes I had to have somebody hold my head up so I can drool out the corner of my mouth, make it impossible for me to heal. You know? And that's how it was for 20 years, you know, but it didn't stop my pain. People hurting me didn't stop there. You would think by the time I was 19 and my marriage ended and I'm homeless, dirty, homeless in the streets, you would think that maybe it would end.
Yes.
But I was being incarcerated and I was court ordered to a drug program and a drug counselor raped me. My very first drug program, the drug counselor raped me. Where do you go from there? So everybody is hurting me. And then they kept putting me on psychotropics, mental health medication, putting me in these little dark rooms where the detention officers were able to sexually abuse me as well, medicated.
Yeah.
So everywhere I was going, people were just hurting me. You know, more and more pain.
So it was one pain after the other. The pain started in the household. It went to the marriage. It went to your cousins. It went to everyone, and it went to the institution as well. The institution joined in the program. Institution that the very people who are out there to protect you saw you were vulnerable, saw you were drugged up, saw you were almost useless to society, and they said, you know what? Let's take advantage of this.
Absolutely.
This lady is no good to society. We're going to take advantage. But something switched. Something happened. I always wonder, how could someone go through all that layers of pain, all that difficult circumstances? Were you sitting in prison? Where were you when you realized? Were you walking past a church? Where were you when you realized enough?
I was in prison, pregnant.
Oh.
And mind you, I had lost 3 more kids living in the streets. I was having children as a result of rapes or prostitution. And they were taken away from me, rightfully so. So here I was in prison again. And when I tell you, Anne, that I got used to being raped. When you're a homeless woman on the streets, you get raped all the time. I got used to the rapes. I did. I would just tell them, hurry up and wipe the dirt off me and go back to the street. I got used to drug dealers taking bats and beating me down and breaking my bones for stealing their stash of drugs. I got used to that. But what I could not get used to is somebody taking my child out of my arms, turning their back, walk away, never for me to see my kids again. So here I was in prison, pregnant again. And I tried something I never sincerely tried before. I cried out to God. I tried God. You know, I knew how to play the Christian in court to try to get out of something, but I never sincerely cried out to God to ask for help. And in that prison cell, 18 years ago, I cried out to God. In that moment, I never had another desire to use drugs, alcohol, or smoke a cigarette. Not one desire for 18 years.
Oh, gosh. But I think that turning point for you was when they took your child.
Well, they didn't take my last child because I was able to go to a program that treated my trauma. So my daughter is 17 now, and she's been in private school all her life. I raised her, so she's just an amazing kid. But all my other kids was taken. But 18 years ago, my turning point was being in prison pregnant. And I started my relationship with God, and I went to this program. And you know, people always ask me, but Tonier, what was it? What was it? And I used to say, well, I didn't want to lose my daughter, but I didn't want to lose my other kids either. What was different? What was different now? Things were made possible for me to be successful in motherhood and homemaking and finding tools to deal with my pain. Because as you know, just because we heal, we don't forget.
No, it stays there.
The only difference is now we have to find healthier ways to cope.
Yes.
That's it. That's what I did.
You describe your strengths and how you overcame your trauma through this message from you. When Jesus Christ came into your life, how did your relationship change for the better? How did it start changing for the better?
Well, it was interesting because, I started I started this relationship with Jesus, and what changed for me was the word of God, because I would just read. And when I read it, I believed it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what really changed it for me. Grace. And I was like, if there's nothing I can do to earn God's love, maybe there's nothing I can do to stop it. And if that's the case, then he does love me and he will help me. And I started to read the word of God. And it's to this day, it's still my weapon to speak into situations, very, very dark situations. Like today, people see me. I'm an award-winning film producer. I produce film and television. I'm known in 60 countries for my work. I'm an author. I'm this, I'm that. I have days named after me by governors and mayors. You know, I train state Supreme Court people now. Somebody with 83 arrests. Now I train judges. So people always see that. And I tell them that none of that would have been made possible if I did not have the relationship I had with God. Because first of all, the first thing I had to do was learn forgiveness. And I could not do that in the natural. That's a spiritual thing when you've been through so much pain as I have.
Can I ask you to just take me through that healing process? When you were in prison, when you got this message, you saw this universe of God telling you that, you know, things can be different now. Can I just start that healing process? Because that's the difficult journey a lot of people struggle with. And as much as I want to go to the next chapter of your life, if people don't understand that transition period, how did you get clean? What help did you seek to get clean? How did you start on that process of, okay, now you're released, they open the door, you could go, you're still pregnant. What did you do?
Well, actually what I did was I just, we all have to have something to help us. And mine was my faith. That was my number one. I really, really spent time trying to find out who God was and find out what I needed to do to help me so I can take care of my daughter. So I went into a program that started to help me to identify, address, and treat my trauma. And this was a program that treated my trauma, mental health, addiction, and I was able to keep my daughter with me. So like I said, something was made possible for me to be successful.
Yes, absolutely. That program was important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That program put you in the right direction. Then how did the institutional system help you along this journey? Because it's such a difficult one to figure out how to get a job rather than going out to steal for money, rather than going to prostitution, rather than getting some other drugs. How did the system help you to be able to stay grounded and still look toward the future?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest thing that I tell people about is that when I was in a program, they did not assume just because I was an adult age, I knew how to be an adult, a responsible adult.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful.
Exactly. What they did was took into consideration my history. 19 years before I got there, I was homeless on the streets. Before then, I was married to an older man. I didn't pay bills. I didn't know how to pay bills. Before then, I was with an irresponsible parent. Where would I learn responsibility? Where would I learn how to be a homemaker? So they did not, like most programs assume, they open up the door and say,
okay, come back. And you're back in again.
Right. And then when you come back, they look at you, what happened? And so it's only because I had people helping me to be a homemaker, to take care of my daughter. They showed me, when I had my daughter, they brought in a specialist to help my daughter to latch on. I breastfed. In the projects where I'm from, don't nobody breastfeed. Don't nobody have a baby hanging from the boobs. They got Similac. They don't give the healthier form. I didn't know about the bonding and all of that. I learned how to form a secure attachment with my daughter, something I never heard before in my life. I learned how to pay bills. I didn't know how to pay bills. I was able to get housing for 5 years. They would give me a housing long as I went to school, volunteer, or work for 40 hours a week. I decided to go back to the program to volunteer to help the new women. And do you know, within 18 months of leaving prison, because somebody showed me how to budget and pay bills, I built my own home. I became a homemaker. I became a homeowner within 18 months of leaving prison because somebody did not assume I knew how to take care of. Today, I own 7 companies, 2 of them global. You know why? Because back then, somebody showed me how to budget a $300 welfare check.
It's laughable right now, but it's absolutely true. The basic stuff, which was you missed out on. The
Right.
basic stuff of life. That
Yeah.
was that was washed away. And all of a sudden you had to learn all this. And
I had to learn everything. I had to be loving and nurturing and protected. Oh, my daughter, I had to learn that.
mm,
I had to learn how to be form a secure attachment because I wasn't given love and nurture and all of that. I had to go through a 1-year course in how to form a secure attachment with my daughter.
that's
You know?
fantastic. Fantastic. And your first book, Healing Meaning, gave us gave real details of your life.
Probably too much, but yeah.
What are the key messages you wanted people to read from that book?
I wanted people to know, like anytime I speak or anything I do, that no matter what, there's hope.
Yes, well, that's true.
No matter what, there's hope. My motto, and you see it everywhere you see my name, where there's breath, there's hope. As long as you're still living, there's an opportunity. There is hope. No
Yeah,
matter what we've been through, no
yeah.
matter what it felt like, what it feels like, there's always hope. And that's what I want people to get out of it. Because I do get graphic and I talk about every horrible thing that happened because I want people to see, as bad as it was, I was still able to overcome. And here I am today. You know?
That's really remarkable you did that because I think we live in this picture perfect world where everyone just assume you could get to that top ladder, you could do this, you could do this, but not realizing the hard work. We look at athletes who are so successful, not realizing when they started playing tennis, when they started playing football, that it was just when Tiger Woods, for example, picked his
Yeah.
course when he was 3 years old. But when we see his success, everyone said, wow, he was so successful. But no, he started
Right.
at 3. He gave his in at 3 years old. So the same reverse with your story, Tonya, is that you need to tell the real story for people to really understand that, no, I look like this today, but it hasn't been like this. And this is such a marvelous thing. You recently released a second book called Relationships After Trauma.
Yes.
How does one rebuild relationship after going such terrible experiences?
It takes time. For me, it takes a lot of prayer. It takes, everybody process different, and the reason why I want you to do the book, because it is, and it's not just about intimate relationships, but every relationship. Being a friend, I talk about how my former friendship was because I still had trust issues. So I would be with people that genuinely I knew care about me, but there was something that would stop me from genuinely caring about them. Like they would tell me about what's going on with them, and I wouldn't hear anything. I would just act like I'm hearing, and I wasn't really being a friend.
Yeah.
And it is because I had issues that I still had some things in my past because everybody hurt me. Just about everybody was hurting me. So what do you learn how to let people in your life and give as much as they're giving you or receive what they're giving you? And so I talk about that in the book. Of course, marriage, dating, you would think that every man that I went on a date with, I expect them to be Jesus. And when I didn't think they were Jesus, I'm out of there. But see, I had to learn. So everything is a process, and even as a mother, I lost my kids, and my older kids are back in my life now. And that has been very difficult. And I talked about what that was like, because now I have this daughter that I raised. And she lived this grand life, went to these best schools, traveled the world. And then I have these older kids that were taken away from me. And they watching me raise my daughter. And they like, so there was we had to work some things out in that relationship. So as an employer, and then when I was an employee, I talk about how trauma impacted my life there in those situations and things like that. So it really breaks down, talks about every relationship, but it's a guidebook that you actually, after each chapter, you work with through a journal. So it's more so kind of helping guide people to create some tools to help them, survival tools to help them in relationships.
That's so good. And you said something about a message from Nigeria that helped you keep your life progressing for the better. I'm thinking, Nigeria, what happened with a message from Nigeria?
Nigeria is very, very dear to my heart. As a matter of fact, my brother, I found out I'm more Nigerian than anything, and which is interesting. My brother, we sent off all that 1, 2, 3 thing, but I went to Nigeria in 2018. Before I went to Nigeria, I had someone contact me, and they said, we work with the girls that has been released or rescued after being kidnapped by Boko Haram. And we use your work over here to help them. And we just wanted you to know this. So I'm like, wow. So I get on, we started Zoom talking, and I said, well, maybe one day I'll come over. And he said, would you really be willing to do that? Now, mind you, we're talking about a part of Nigeria. We're not talking about Lagos. We're talking Kaduna, Josh. We're talking northern, where the State Department of the United States said, do not go. And but I went, and I'm actually got a film called The Unseen Village that's in post-production. I'm doing about that. But what changed my life was when I was there, no matter what the Nigerian people was up against, nothing tainted their spirit.
No.
It blew my mind. And that's what I want this film to show. The spirit of the Nigerian people, even my camera people. He told me that he was in church and another church was bombed. He walked outside, body parts was, and so this man still to be there and functional. And the time I spent with them changed my life.
Yeah.
Amazing people in the midst of no matter what. They had the spirit of love. And I mean, even you had, Nigerians 50-50, Muslim and Christians, but they were like in the room with me together, and we had one common thing, love.
Yes.
It blew my mind. It changed my life.
I'm so glad you did go, because I'm originally from Nigeria, so I've lived in the country, and I think this is the reason why I have a different view and different perspective of any kind of pain that anyone is going through, because I believe that sometimes we go over dramatize pain, while in reality it's not that big. You just have to find a way to get on to the next hump, because life will always throw challenges at you. It doesn't matter how successful, unsuccessful you are, life will always give you all kinds of pain. Like even people who are successful go through their own kind of pain. People are less privileged go through their pain. So it's how do you find joy in the midst of anything you're going through? So but I'm so glad you talked about that, because a lot of people are hidden away from that very beautiful truths. As a former team leader for the National Center for Trauma Informed Care, with the National Association of the State's Mental Health Program Director, what were some of the greatest forms of trauma you saw that really made you change?
So actually that position was incredible, because what they did was they brought in somebody that had no higher education, no letters behind their name, to be the team leader. When SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, funded NCTIC, the National Center for Trauma Informed Care, they brought me in as a team leader. So my job really was to educate the country on how trauma impacts the individual. So my job was to go to all state-ran and privately ran programs to train and help them to understand that they need to start looking at what happened to an individual instead of what's wrong with them. And that was my job, to lead the team to go out into the nation to help change the way that we provide services in the United States.
That's wonderful. And what does it take to fix trauma? If we have to fix the trauma, especially with the pandemic, we've seen that what the pandemic has done to so many people. It's left a lot of people traumatized, especially people whose life has always been perfect, and all of a sudden everything was taken away from you. What does it take to fix this trauma?
Well, it takes fixing the people that's providing services, first of all, because our system is jacked up, when I tell you. So, it takes people to really understand, first of all, that everybody's an individual, have their own individualized trauma. Like me and you we've been traumatized, but the people that traumatized us, or the situation that traumatized us, was different. That means, and we're two different people, so we had different strengths. So that means what you need and what I need to help me to soothe and self-regulate, self-ground myself is different. Exactly. And so the system is really, it have that one size fit all. If you're a rape victim, for example, if you're a rape victim, the first thing they do is call out the rape crisis people. The rape crisis people are volunteers. They're volunteers. So they come into the hospital and they ask you the same question that they ask everybody else. You know what I mean? So it's like, who raped me didn't rape her. That mean I remember different from my experience. So it's really understanding that you have to use the 6 components. You have to help people, you have to acknowledge it, help people feel safe. You got to help let people have choice and control. You know what I mean? And you really got to have hope for people. And that's so I created a 6-hour training called the Rich Approach that helped to train providers and how to strengthen relationship with trauma survivors. So because it takes really engaging with a trauma survivor to understand their needs and helping them and going through the healing process with them, not making them go your way, but allowing them to lead it, and you just kind of being that GPS system for people.
Now, that's very important, and something really, I love what you said about what you've been through is very different from what I've been through, because my own trauma was my chronic illness pain, and that left me traumatized because it just wouldn't go away. And then your own pain was physical humanity pain. People just put in abuse on you one after the other. So our traumatizing effect of the way we heal will be so different. It's just up to, but society cannot treat us the same, because what I'm thinking to myself, well, I can't do anything to make you can't take me out of the environment, because the thing is with me, it's born inside me. I can't leave that environment. How are you telling me to leave my body? You're saying that I'm born into this environment, but these people are physical. You could actually physically take me out, but now it's stuck in my head. How do I take my head out of what I've seen, what I've physically felt? And it's just something that society needs to learn. How do you fix us when people are like that? What one spoon does not fit all. Everyone has a different spoon. It's just so. But you also have done this movement. So you have a movement at the Tonier Cain International, which is developing to helping the movement and helping people universally understand the nature of trauma. And I applaud you for this. How do you implement the philosophy at a community level? Because that's also very important, that the community understands it. Kids going to school understand this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we do things different. So I do something called the Deliverance Tour, where it's more community based. And what I do is, like, I go into a state, and for the whole weekend I'm there. I'm for Friday to Sunday, because I want to hit everybody on. I want to meet with the leaders, as they call themselves, on Friday night. Saturday morning I kind of do like any providers that's in the community. I do like a mini training for the provider, and at night it's for the community. And to community is more like I talk about, I get on stage, I tell my story, I talk about my story, and then we bring in some other kind of speakers or singers and just make it that community. But the whole thing is about letting people know that there's hope. And then the next morning, I want to hit the church community. So I don't leave until I get to the church community, because that's a part of the community that we really need to get to about trauma, because we can't just keep telling people, let us pray, and don't give them nothing else, right? So I spend time with the church community as well. So we do hit them at all. We hit it at all levels.
You're an award-winning film producer. Congratulations on that. How do you use your platform, the medium, to teach people about trauma and overcoming it? How do you use that?
Oh, absolutely. So I have a production company that I own called Purposeful Entertainment. And so that's because all of our content has a purpose. we just have a new film that we are about to premiere. Well, it's actually being, it's at the studios being considered. It's called Walking Through Bullets. It's a gang-related film, but it talks about community violence. As a result of community violence, the men that boys become. It's a very powerful film, and we use real gang members in this film. And so that's my new. Of course, The Unseen Village is my Nigerian film that I'm doing. It's about what happens to the girls when they return to the villages after being kidnapped. That's in post-production. I think that's my baby.
Yes.
So I'm not willing to I don't want to. I still think I need to get more footage on that. But then we have that. I have a TV show called The Advocate right now, and it's kind of like a drama. It's a thriller drama, but it really shows like what happens when we don't address and treat our trauma. What really can happen. And yeah. So we have a lot of good stuff. a lot of good stuff that we have and that we develop. And but all of our films, in some way, somehow, there's a message about hope.
Tonya, before I let you go, my final question. You've overcome so much. You've overcome trauma, you've overcome sexual abuse, you've overcome marriage abuse, you've overcome bad relationships, you've overcome parents, mother relationship, you've overcome having so many siblings.
Mhm.
All of this, your life, when you look back, so much of emotional hardship has been with you, right? What are the things in life that brings you joy today?
Oh my goodness, my relationship with Jesus, that's my number one thing. I spend a lot of time with Jesus in the morning. My work, I have a lot of people that work for me and I look at them as family. And so I have a lot of people that surround me. My life is amazing because my life has a purpose and I have a purposeful life. And I think that brings me joy. And my daughter, who is a teenager now, that's a whole different level of trauma, but that's a whole nother topic. Just doing the things I'm doing and my life. Just imagine 18 years ago, I was eating out of a trash can, prostituting, not allowed to go in anybody's house to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
And today I have been to the White House, I've been to United Nations, I've been countries all over the world helping people. I mean,
Congratulations.
that is more than enough to smile every day, no matter what.
Tony,
There's hope. There's hope. I live with hope
Excellent.
every day. Every day I just live with hope.
I'm super delighted to have spent this time with you. I learned so much about life. I learned so much about trauma. I learned there's hope. It doesn't matter what we're going through, there is always hope. Thank you so much for taking this time to speak to me.
Well, thank you for having me. You have a great day.
Thank you.